Genesis 4. Sure, man and Eve had now been exposed to shame and judgment and resentment and anger. They must have been shocked and confused at God's rejection. But don't get it twisted. The minute they were evicted from paradise, they started having sex. Eve conceived almost immediately. Since the Bible said nothing at the time about abortion, she carefully weighed her options. On the one hand, she could give birth to a child outside of paradise and expose it to the harsh realities of the world, such as the fact that he could never have a partner because, well, there were no other people. Or she could just do the same thing and abort this child. She decided that having lost God's grace and being forced to live with want and desire, she foolishly believed the child would fulfill her. She gave birth to a boy and named him Cain, which probably meant first child born to man, so how can he possibly be anything other than perfect? Before long, she gave birth to a second son, naming him Abel, probably meaning BFF to Cain for life. We're not told of Cain and Abel's childhood and upbringing, but it must have been very odd. It was just man, Eve, and the two of them. But they both survived into adulthood, each finding a way to survive. Cain became a proficient farmer, growing many types of crops. For his part, Abel became a competent shepherd, commanding a decent-sized flock. Despite God's rejection of man, and Eve, and their family, Cain believed it would be a neighborly gesture to offer the big guy some of his own labor, directly from the fields he worked so hard to cultivate. Abel saw what Cain was planning and decided to tag along and bring his own offering, a lamb. When Cain and Abel brought their offerings to God, he was visibly beaming while accepting the gift of meat from Abel. It had been the happiest he'd been since he had to exile man and Eve. Cain and Abel had certainly never seen him so happy. Cain knew this was a great idea, and so he then presented God with his labor, the fruits of the earth itself. But when God turned to see what Cain had brought for him, his entire face sunk into a look of pity and revulsion. Cain was enraged by God's tactless rejection of his benevolent gesture. When God realized how angry Cain had become, he said to him,
"Hey man, you better chill out. I have no idea what you're upset about. You brought me some raw fruits and vegetables, which, by the way, give me tremendous gas. You want to see the creator deity with uncontrollable gas? Do you? I didn't think so. Son, you better check your anger and rethink what's what. Next time, bring me some shit I might actually have a use for, and you'll see how much praise I heap upon you. Otherwise, you're gonna fuck around and find out, just like your mom and dad."
For months, Cain replayed this humiliation over and over in his mind. God, the creator of all, even mom and dad, rejected him. And worse, his little brother, who stole his idea of gifting something to God, was the one upon whom God showered his joy. Nah, man, Cain was not going to stand for that type of injustice. It didn't take long before one day, after luring Abel far into his field, Cain murdered him. The timeline isn't clearly presented, but eventually, God needed Abel for something and couldn't find him. When he asked Cain if he knew where his brother could be found, Cain responded,
"Motherfucker, do I look like my brother's keeper? Leave me the fuck alone. I'm done with you, you gaslighting asshole."
God took a deep sigh and collected himself before doing anything he was going to regret. He used that moment to feel for Abel. It wasn't long before the knowledge of what occurred came to him. Upon this realization, he spoke to Cain.
"I warned you about keeping your anger in check, but no, you had to fuck around. Well, now, you're gonna find out. You know those precious fruits and veggies you love growing so much? Well, from now until you die, anything you grow will taste like monkey droppings. Even you will be disgusted by the crops you grow, from now until the end of your days. Oh, and one more thing. You can't stay here anymore. You has gots to go. Matter of fact, you can't stay anywhere anymore. You're gonna wander this motherfucker forever until your ass drops dead. You will never know a home ever again. Now get the fuck out of my sight.
This punishment prompted Cain to present God with a scenario that throws a plot twist into Genesis.
Tell me this, you goofy bastard. If your intent is to punish me by having me roam around from place to place and never be content, will your vengeance be satisfied if someone were to kill me? Bet you hadn't thought of that, had you?
Cain here is suggesting that other people exist. Does he know something we don't? Either way, we have just been presented with an entirely new canon to work with. As for Cain, God marked him in a way that deterred anyone from killing him, ensuring that his vengeance would be fulfilled. Cain left his home and parents and went east to Nod. This gets us to the beginnings of civilization. Whatever mark God left on Cain to stop people from murdering him apparently didn't stop people from having sex with him, because he got married and had a kid. Cain named the kid Enoch. If I had to guess, this probably meant, fuck God, or something like that, but don't quote me on it. Cain loved this kid so much, he built an entire goddamn city in his honor, calling it Enoch. Eventually, Enoch had kids, and his kids had kids, and these were the people who were the original musicians, artists, builders, farmers. The entire spectrum of all the craftsmen and artisans and laborers that started civilization. While all that was happening, just outside the east gate of Eden, man and Eve were still alive, in their hundreds. We learned that man's name is Adam. I guess at some point Eve realized she needed something to call him by during all those times she had to correct him for his actions and thoughts. But alas, he was the only man, and she knew desire, and so Adam and Eve conceived another child and named him Seth, probably meaning, I hope this one turns out okay. Seth would eventually have a kid of his own, but with whom it's never stated. Hopefully he moved to Enoch or something, because back home by Eden, there was only one other woman, and she was way older than him. Several generations into Seth's line, God's cult following started growing steadily. End of Genesis 4.